My father, Ralph, had an accident on December 23rd. He was coming home from a planning board meeting, and nobody really knows the details of it, but he came around a corner and didn't actually make the curve properly and hit a tree, and I mean, really banged himself up. Broken bones, punctured lungs, perforated esophagus, broken pelvis, brain contusion. I mean, just on and on it went. Father bought the property in 2001, and he had the intention of creating something totally different than what it actually turned out to be.
It was all an accident. The foundation of Tuthilltown Spirits was an accident. It was meant to be a climbing ranch.
We come from a rock climbing background, so we had the intention of buying this property and turning it into a sort of bed and breakfast or ranch style accommodations for rock climbers. So you could get anything from a tent to a private room.
He liked the idea, and the neighbors didn't at all. And through litigation, basically bled the capital dry. His business was impossible to get off the ground.
As long as we're a farm use in an agricultural zone, you can do anything you want as long as you meet building codes. So somebody suggested that we look into farm wineries.
Ralph and I were just talking, and Ralph said that the law in New York had changed to allow small distillers to operate.
Nobody else was making whiskey at the time. There was only one other small distillery in New York State. So for us, it seemed like a natural niche to fall into.
Ralph said, let's start a distillery, and I said, okay. And that was about as complicated as it got.
So they got that license and began distilling in 2005. By the time it had aged and was ready to be bottled, they took it to Linnell, who's a sort of the whiskey maven of New York. And she said they were hoping for something passable. Maybe we could just make a little bit of cash off of this. And she said, it's phenomenal and I'll buy the entire batch.
Gable had gone on to create a very successful young career for himself in experiential marketing, and he could have gone anywhere. He was capable, he had a college degree, very smart, and the sky was the limit for him, I think. And what he chose to do was to work here at Tuthilltown with his dad. Ralph lives for Gable. He's the light of his life, and Gable walks in the room and his face lights up.
You know, the two of them are great because they bounce ideas off of each other and reinforce each other and support each other.
They seem to have such a bond. They seem to really love each other.
Once I was out of the city and I was up here and I was working hands-on in the production aspect of the business, there was no turning back.
He was the one doing all the distillation and filling all the barrels, and when we got engaged, I would come up and it was just late nights, the two of us, you know, filling barrels, and it was so romantic, and I think it was part of the lure that brought me up here full time, and you know, I quit my job and just moved up here and we started building the business.
But the first couple of months turned into years were, you know, day by day, paycheck to paycheck. We were, you know, working 18-hour days, 7 days a week.
I never imagined myself in this position, and I think it's so wonderful to be this passionate about, you know, your day-to-day work.
I was perfectly happy and content being out of the city, being up here in nature, doing physical work as opposed to sitting in a cubicle every day.
first meeting Ralph was just, he's such an amazing person, very warm, very welcoming, always has a smile on his face, and made my coming here very, very, very comfortable.
Well, I think everybody would describe him as a real go-getter, rises to any challenge. He's a true entrepreneur.
He's a resilient, hardworking guy who really doesn't take no for an answer, and that's sort of been his MO all through life. He started multiple businesses, including before Tuthilltown. He started a rock climbing gym in New York City on 62nd Street and Broadway. You can imagine the amount of regulatory hoops you have to jump through in order to do a public rock climbing gym on Broadway in the middle of Manhattan.
He practically leaps and bounds into the room with ideas, and we'd be sitting in staff meetings and he can hardly contain himself. He's so excited about things, and his passion really carries through to the rest of the team.
I was sitting at my desk at home and my wife came in and said, your dad's been in a car accident, we gotta go, we gotta go.
It's a really small town, Gardner, so the people, I guess, who helped him out of his accident, they stopped by the distillery in the morning to make sure the family was okay. And none of us even knew that Ralph had gotten in an accident.
One of the local EMT guys, who was a friend of ours, came by the next day and said, how's Ralph? And Joel was like, oh, he's fine, down in the house. He said, no, I don't think so. We looked down, his car wasn't there, so they called us. And it was, I had no idea how bad it was. It was just, he's been in an accident, and hopped in the car and drove over there just on the phone trying to get through to ICU and figure out what happened.
It was painful to know that he had been through the night alone because our contact information wasn't readily available.
When you hear about somebody being hurt that's close to you, you just sort of stop. Like, oh wow, what are we going to do now? And the word early on was that it was really severe, and everybody was very concerned.
I had no idea how bad the accident was. And then when I started hearing more and more and more about it, it was just, my heart went into my throat thinking, I'm like, oh my God, how is this place going to survive without Ralph?
First day, they didn't expect him to make it through. The cardiologist gave him a 5% chance on that first day. He was bloated. He was intubated with the tube down his throat. He was just internal bleeding and bruising, and he was resuscitated twice. Fell off the X-ray table. Was in the operating room over a dozen times, and just lost 50, 60 quarts of blood.
He was so badly injured that, for weeks, we really, he was just hanging on.
Every day they were just sort of preparing us for the worst, and at some point they said, if this goes on, it's going to be a really long road, just so you guys are aware. And sure enough, it's turned into a really long road.
Ralph was the keeper of so much information, so we were able to, go back through things and find out how many little things he was involved in and try to carry forth those efforts. In the time that Ralph has been ill and healing, we had a new still installed. We've been working on our licenses.
My wife Kathy has stepped up as the real distillery manager.
Gable's been up at his father's bedside for most of the time, so I can definitely say that we all realized our strengths. We all just kind of tried to pick up the pieces and keep going, and I'm really impressed with the way that the team managed.
Right now we're actually dropping in still 3. Up until today we've been a 2-still operation, and our 3rd still arrived about a month ago, and we've been preparing the building for it. So today they cut a hole in the roof, and we've got a crane here in the parking lot, and they're hooking up behind me. You can see they're hooking up the column, which is going to go up next. So the still just went in through the roof. The column goes up through the roof now, and the condenser. Then we put the cupola on top because it's just a little too tall for the building, and seal it up. Then we're ready to heat up the stills.
Going into the ICU in the hospital is sort of a petri dish for different types of bacteria and infections. So what started out as a car accident turned into, he ended up being in ICU for 84 days. I guess the way we looked at it was every day he was alive, he was healing in some way, and that was true. And even when he had setbacks with infection, his bones were healing, his lungs were rejuvenating, and sort of goes to the same point about his persistence. Even when he was unconscious and not aware of what he was doing, his body was still, was still fighting every step of the way. They typically say you've got 10 days for every 1 day in ICU. He was in ICU for 84 days. He's got 1 month in rehab, so he's going to be pushed pretty hard. But I think he can handle it.
You've heard me say your entire life that you can make a decision and you're determined and you do it in a smart way. You can do just about anything you want to do. And the thing that climbing really gave me a handle on was the fact that I could do a lot more than I thought at any given time.
They said at every single stage, it was, we don't think he's going to come out of this, but this is a last chance. It's given me a whole new appreciation for life and for the world. Life is an extremely valuable and rare thing and fragile. It doesn't take much to kill it off, not really, except a will. And that's about the only defense you have against the rest of the world is strong will. I went through what they call ICU psychosis, which is if you're stuck in an ICU, all of the activity is sort of overwhelming for your mind, and the drugs that they're giving you, plus the drugs that were given to me for surgery, I started having some very strange dreams that I absolutely believed were true. During one of my dreams, I gave up. Found myself sitting in the back of a chapel waiting for my son to arrive to say goodbye to me, and I was just sitting there with my head down, ready to die, ready to have it be done with. But then he showed up, and then the dream changed, and at that point, any of my waking times when I was lucid, I never had a thought but to get through this and get back to work. My family really supported me in that greatly. They were constantly encouraging me, telling me I would, you're going to beat this, you're strong enough, and I can't wait to get back to work. It's the best job I've ever had.
I mean, deep inside, it was just, there's no way that the saga of his life could end this way. It's just, he spent so much time and hard work to get to where he is now.
It's not even that he can overcome. Give him a challenge, and in some manner, he will overcome it. So it was no surprise that during this horrible 3 months, where no one expected him to live through the first day, no less at other points throughout the 3 months, his being took over. That innate part of him that said, I'm not going to let this get me down, I'm going to rise to this occasion. And he did. And people have been amazed by the fact that he's pulled through. One of the head doctors said that he was such an inspiration because he just didn't seem to give up.
I have a favorite quote from Winston Churchill, which is, never give up, never, never give up.